Hey everybody, Jeffrey Way here with JavaScript from Null Chapter 2. So today we're going to take things a little bit further. We're going to learn about primitive data types. We're going to learn about the correct way to create your variables, different kinds of notation that you can use. We'll learn about if statements, and you'll start learning some functions and some of the native objects. So we'll learn a lot today. So first things first. JavaScript is a loosely typed language. So what does that mean? It means you don't have to explicitly state the data type. Instead, JavaScript will do that for you. So let's get right into it and get an example of that. Okay, and once again, index.html. So, how is JavaScript loosely typed? Well, for instance, we could create a variable, we'll call it myVar, and we could make it equal to one of three primitive data types. We have string, and that's just a series of characters wrapped in quotations. This is a string. We have a number, which, as you would expect, is just a number. And then we have Boolean, and Boolean is true or false. That's all it can ever be. It can be represented by 0 or 1 for false and true, respectively, or true or false, and actually a couple different ways. So once again, if we wanted to create a Boolean, we could do true. Okay, so let's see what loosely typed actually means. So let's say myVar equals 5, console.log. And let's go ahead and get this running in Firefox. There we go, and if I open it up, refresh the page, we will get 5, of course. So now, let's say myVar equals myVar, and then we're going to add a string to it. So myVar plus, let's this time take a number and put it in quotes and see what we get here. And now we get 5, 10. So how is that possible? We know 5 plus 10 equals 15. But when we have a number plus a string, the string is converted into a number, and then rather than being added to it, it is appended to it. So it's basically the equivalent of taking 5 and then appending 1 0 after it. Okay? So let's try it the other way around. myVar equals some string, and now we're going to do myVar equals myVar plus 5. And now we're going to get some string 5. So in this case, 5 is converted to a string and is then appended to the string. Okay, so that's what we mean by loosely typed. And if you are aware of things like Hungarian notation, which was where you would prepend what type of data a particular variable is. So maybe if it was a string or something, you would do string myVar equals some string. And that was very popular, and it's really fallen out of favor in recent years, but it's especially not a great idea with JavaScript because as JavaScript is loosely typed, your variables can easily be changed, even potentially without you knowing. So it's possible that string myVar has turned into a number or a Boolean, but it still has the name string myVar, which doesn't make any sense. So instead, the common practice with most JavaScript developers is to use something called camel casing. And camel casing is where you group all words into one, and then you take each new word and you make the first letter capital. So in this case, we would do my, and then the first word, the first letter capital. myVar goes here. Things like that. Notice how the first letter of the first word is always lowercase. So if we did another one, we could do, this is myVar. These aren't great variable names by any means, but just to give you an idea, this is, if you look at JavaScript libraries, this is the most common that you'll see. And that's what we'll be doing throughout this series. The next thing I want to go over is the fact that variables are case sensitive. So by this I mean myVar equals some string, and I already have that up there, don't I? myVar equals some string is not the same as myVar all lowercase. Sure. And just to prove that, why don't we console it? Like that. And let's see what this says, some string, and now let's change it to the lowercase, and we get another string. So you need to be very careful about that. You need to make sure your variables match Exactly. And that's why it's so smart to use something like camel casing, is because you always know exactly how it will be written. Okay. Next step is operators. Operators are, if you're doing math, you learned about operators in math class. Plus, minus, divided by, multiplied by. There's a lot of them. Modulus. So let's just take an example. And we're going to console, let's do var add, and that's going to be equal to 5 plus 10. In this case, plus is the operator. And if we want to alert add, we get 15, exactly what you would expect. Alternatively, if we do subtract, minus is the operator, and we get negative 5. You probably know this already, but 5 times 10, 50. And these are the ones you'll most often use. Okay. And five. Okay, and that's modulus. So, how can we, let's see ways you can, more practical examples. If we wanted to add 1, you'll do this very often, where maybe you'll be looping through a for statement, which is you'll learn probably in the next lesson, and each entry you want to perform an operation and then maybe add 1 to a variable. And then at the beginning of each operation you can say, if this variable has reached this number, I'm finished, and break out of the for statement. You'll do that very often. So how do you do that? Var x equals 1, and to increase this number by 1, you have many different options. You could do x equals x plus 1, and now why don't we alert x, and we get 2. So we're just saying the variable x is equal to its current value plus 1, or 2. The next way you can do it is, let's comment that out. We can do x plus equals 1. And if I do it again, you're going to get 2 again. So what is this plus equals? And that is literally the shorthand for this. When you say plus equal, you're just saying x plus 1 would equal x plus 1 would be 2. But it's also going to assign that value back to x. So x equals itself plus 1, and this is the most common. You'll never see most JavaScripters use this. They'll use plus equals 1. But in this case, when you're only appending 1, you would do something different. You could do x plus plus. You'll see this a lot. Now let's see it again, if that works. And once again, we get 2. All right, so what's x plus plus? And it literally means add 1, increment by 1. Alternatively, you have x minus minus, which would be the same as x equals x minus 1, or x minus equals 1. This time notice minus equal instead of plus equal. Okay, I'm going to come to those out, and once again, let's alert, and we are going to get 0 because x equaled 1, and we did x minus minus means x decrement by 1. Okay, important that you know those. So, the next thing I want to teach you is the difference. This is an important one. I think when I first got started, this confused me. There is a difference between doing something like x equals 10 and x equals 10. Okay, so that looks like a typo, doesn't it? It's not. One of them, when you use a single one, you are literally assigning a value. So in this case, we are doing the variable x is now equal to 10. Take the number 10 and assign it to this variable, and then if we alerted that to the window, it would of course alert 10. This one down here is different. Here we are checking if the value of x is equal to, if it's 100% equal to the value. You would use this maybe in if statements or things like that. So in this case, we're not assigning 10 to x. We're actually just checking if the values are identical. So for an example here, we have x equals 10, and let's do an if statement. And I'm not positive if we went over this in lesson 1, but if not, we do if, and within parentheses we have something to check for. So if, let's do if x equals 15. Now this is not correct, but we are going to try it this way first. If x equals 15, and then within brackets we're going to have the operation that we perform, and we're going to alert they are the same. So we're just saying if the variable x equals 15, then we're going to alert the same. So do you think that alert box will display? Let's see. Refresh the page, and we get, whoops, let's go ahead and get out. Save that and try that again. They are the same. Okay, so try to figure this out on your own. Pause if you need to. Why are we getting an alert box? Because if we read this through like a human being, if x, or let's just replace the variable with the number, and we're saying if 10 equals 15, then alert it. Remember, the code within here will only run if this passes. So it's not passing, yet it's still running. If 10 equals 15, alert this. Well, 10 does not equal 15. And this comes back to what I was teaching you before. We are not checking if 10 equals 15. We are actually saying if the operation of assigning x equal to the value of 15 performed successfully, then alert. So to give you a better idea, this time why don't we alert x again? So we're going to get two alerts. They are the same, and 15. So you see, we didn't check anything. We literally assigned a new value to x. So this, especially if you're getting started, I think that would have confused you, and that's why I want to go over it. So the correct way to do it would be if x, there's actually two different methods. You'll see people do 2 equal signs or 3 equal signs. I'm not even going to teach you the 2 equal signs because it's just considered a bad practice. The heads of the JavaScript community would always recommend use 3 equal signs, and we're going to go into that a little bit more, what the differences are, but it actually gets kind of complicated. So we'll stick with this. No, if we're actually checking, use 3, and then there's also a minus version that we'll go into shortly. So refresh the page, and nothing happens. So let's create an else statement. Else, alert, they are not the same. They are not the same. There we go. So now we've done it. And I do want to clarify that if we change that to 2, you're going to get the same thing. But, and once again, for reasons that we're not going to go to in this lesson, use 3. It's smarter. Okay. So there, just like we can check if there's something is exactly the same, we can say if it's not the same. So once again, I'm going to comment this out. We're going to use the CSS version for commenting, which is /* and then * / to close. And this time we're going to say if x does not equal 4, alert something. Let's do alert something. And we get something. And else, alert something else. Okay, so what does this mean? We're saying if 10 does not equal 4, alert something, but remember, once again, we're doing an assignment type property. So actually, in this case, you would want to do 2 equal signs. Okay? So just know you have equals and not equals. Okay? Both of these, we're saying if this value does not equal that, then alert it. But let's change it to 10. And you're going to get something else. Because we're saying if x or 10 does not equal 10, alert something else. If it does equal that value, alert something else. And in this case, they are the same, so it would do the else. Okay? Next, we're going to take a deeper look at primitive data types. So if you have even a modest knowledge of JavaScript, you'll know that simple things like strings have methods available to them. So what are methods? Think of methods are the same as functions, but when it's inside of an object, and I know this is a little higher level than we're getting to, they're referred to as methods. So, for instance, bar my string equals this is my string, and we can actually call a method on this string. So why don't we do alert my string, and one of the methods available to us would be something like to uppercase. And as you would expect, it's going to go through this string and change it to uppercase. This is my string. Okay, great, that makes sense. But did you ever stop to think this string that we created right here is not an object? So how can we call methods of an object when we're not working with an object, we're working with a string? Have you ever thought about that? So here's how it works. In addition to strings, numbers, and the Boolean data type, you also have the object version of those. So there's actually a string object. And notice with we use capital letters. We use capital letters for objects. So we have a string object. We have a Boolean object. We have a number object. So literally what's happening, and it's important to know what's going on under the scenes. So when you use a string method, JavaScript will actually wrap that string right here into its counterpart, the string object. It will then call the method, or in this case, toUpperCase, or the function. It'll call that method. It's going to return the value, assign it, or do whatever you want. In this case, we alerted that value back, and then it discards the object. So I know that's confusing, but just remember, even though you're working with a string, because of JavaScript, we actually have access to the string objects methods or the number objects methods and things like that. So additionally, we would have access to things like length. And we're going to get 17. So what is length? Length it actually is different depending on whether you're working with string or number. With the string, it's just the length in characters. In this case, 17 characters make up this. So I'm going to do one more space and hello, and you're going to see it's going to add like 6 more or something, up to 23. Okay, so that's how it works. Just remember, when you use the string method, it wraps the string into the string object, calls the method, returns the value, discards the object, and then you're back with your string. Very high level, but just try to get your head around to that. Next up, Booleans. So once again, Booleans reference true or false. So we could create a variable called is screencast. Is this a screencast? Is totally gibberish, but we'll say true. Notice we did not wrap that in quotes. In that case, we would actually be making is screencast a string. And we get string. There you go. So what I don't want to go into this too much because you don't need to know it in the second lesson, but basically we're just alerting. Type of means what data type is it. Type of is screencast equals true. Now, let's change it to the correct way, and you'll notice with many text editors it'll actually display in a different color to let us know, oh, this is a Boolean. And now we're going to get Boolean. Okay? So, let me scroll down. What can we do with the Boolean? Well, we can do things like we can combine it with if statements. So we could say if is screencast alert your voice. Your voice. Why did that alert? Let's go ahead and do an else statement as well. Alert written tutorial. Okay, so why did it alert your voice? What made this true? Well, we assigned a data type to it. So, I'm sorry, we assigned a true to it. So we're saying if true, alert your voice. So when you're doing an if statement, you're always checking is this true or is this false. So here, if we changed it to false, which one do you think will run this time? If false, alert your voice, or else, if true, alert written tutorial. Oops, let's go back to Firefox. And we are going to get written tutorial because, once again, this operation, or this checking came to false, so we don't run that one, but we do run else, which means else if true. So I'm going to show you the next thing. Let's say true, and we're going to add a exclamation point here. And you probably don't know what that is just yet, but we're going to get written tutorial. So let me find TextMate. What the exclamation point does is it negates whatever comes in front of it. So we're saying if screencast, that equals true. But we're saying if not true, then alert your voice. Else, if true, alert written tutorial. Okay, and we'll go into that. I don't want to do too much with that, but we will be working with that one a lot. And that's just, it just negates it. So now I want to teach you about functions. Can't remember if we've gone over functions yet, but remember, functions are just blocks of code that simplify your tasks. If you're going to call an operation multiple times, it's smart, turn it into a function. That way you only have to call it one time. So JavaScript comes with a handful of native functions. What's a native function? A function that is built into JavaScript. So for instance, one of them will be parse float. P-A-R-S-E-F-L-O-A-T. And let's say 25 pixels. Var num, or var z equals that, and alert c, 25. So what parse float does is it'll go through your string and it'll pull out every number until it gets to a non-number. So if we added more numbers, let's see what would happen here. May not be what you expect. We're still going to get 25. So why? Why didn't we pull out the 5055? And the reason is it stops literally once it gets to anything that's not a number or an operator. In this case, I did 25 pixels because you'll actually be working with something like this in a future lesson. 25 pixels, it goes through, it says 2, that's a number, 5, that's a number, p, that's not a number, so we break and we return those first numbers and assign it to z, and you get parse float. So what you could do here often is maybe get the value of maybe the height of a element, and then you say z is equal to that height, and it might say something like 35 pixels. But if you want to work with that number, you really can't because it has px appended to it. So what you could do is you could call parse float on that number, and then you would pull out 25, perform some operation on the number, maybe increase it because you're going to increase the height of your element, and then you append px back to it and return it and assign it to the element. So we're going to get into that. It's a little higher level, but no, parse float is one that you'll find yourself using quite often. And the final one is, I don't want to do too many functions because we're going to go over all of them, but here's one you might find yourself using quite a bit. You encode URI component, and let's see. Okay, so let's create our new variable var and alert that. And basically, as you would expect, encode URI and component takes a string or the value of a variable and it encodes it. You'll notice things within your URL are URI encoded. So if I refresh the page again, you can see how it's replaced things with %3a and all of these different, so you don't have to worry about maybe spaces or things like that, or special characters. It'll go ahead and encode them. And alternatively, if you want to decode them, you would do inc equals decode URI component. And now we go back to getting our original value. So that's something we're going to be doing in a later lesson. Once again, this isn't a function that we created. This is a native function of JavaScript that we have available to us. And you're going to find there's a bunch of functions and methods that we're going to work with, and it's just a matter of getting to them. So that's the most I want to cover today. In Chapter 3, we're going to start getting into some more meaty things, so make sure you understand these basic fundamentals before we move forward. I will see you guys with Chapter 3, and once again, thank you so much for watching. And the final thing, if you're still watching, I appreciate it. Last week we launched a new marketplace called CodeCanyon.net, and CodeCanyon is a marketplace where you can sell scripts, components, snippets for PHP, JavaScript, ASP.NET, and Java. And we've already got a lot of great stuff, but if you're an author and you have some great ideas or scripts and you want to make some money, CodeCanyon is the newest inbound marketplace, and it's going to be where you can make it, especially in PHP and JavaScript, and we're building up our ASP.NET and Java categories. So please do check that out, CodeCanyon.net. I will see you next week at net.touchplus.com, and as always, follow us on twitter.com/nettouch. I will see you next week. I'm Jeffrey Way. Bye.